we're talking about training needs analysis for PMO teams, also for PMO people, not necessarily from a team point of view or the kind of manager's point of view. The reason why we put this together was because of the, we all need development. We know that the whole space around PMO and different pockets of PMO and work that we do is changing all the time. And we also know that, budgets are tight, and being able to get the right kind of development, whether it's for yourself or for a wider team, if you're managing that team, we have to make sure that we dovetail into corporate processes and how this kind of stuff gets done. And any kind of HR learning and development department, training needs analysis is one of the core kind of processes, frameworks, tools that people use in order to make sure that the workforce is developing in line with what the organization wants. So we took a little, a different cut, a different view. Don't know how many of you are well aware of training needs analysis and the types of steps that are involved. So we thought we'd put together an ebook which you can download, and Jen's my able assistant here today. She'll be able to put that into the chat, so you can pick that up after the event. So something that you can actually keep and look through at your leisure. One of the other things that obviously we do in terms of PMO learning lunch and learns like this is please do make sure you get into chat if you'd like to. Any questions that come up as we go through, I'm keeping an eye on it. I'll be able to answer those questions. And anything that you're seeing here, yes, the presentation and this recording will be available afterwards as well via the website. Best way to keep in touch with what we've got going on is to make sure that you get our newsletter. And again, Jen will pop into chat how you can get access to that. Always, what's the latest things that are going on in terms of learning and development around PMOs, but also good stuff like discount rates and codes and things like that, which you hopefully might find useful. So today, thanks for joining me for lunch. Let's crack on, shall we? So today we're just going to look at what a training needs analysis is, and then we'll look at the process and give you some insights there that you might be able to utilize in your own work around training and development. Okay, so let's go. So training needs analysis, I don't know how many of you are already familiar with it. You might have heard the term before. But essentially, it is a process that organisations use to help them to identify what the discrepancies might be between the current levels that people have within their organisation and what is needed in order to be able to do the job. So rather than a lot of organisations can be guilty of, well, we just need some project management training because everybody needs to know about projects, and therefore we'll do this whole, we'll get everybody Prince2 certified. You hear that quite a lot. I've certainly have over the years. But actually, there is a science behind to help make sure that organisations are choosing the right kind of development for the people that are working for them, in line with what organisations are doing both now and where it's going in the future. So gaps that exist between the skills of the people within the team. So again, if we're talking as you and an individual, if you're managing a PMO team, your PMO team, but also you as a member of that team, but also making sure that the skills that people have, the training that they have access to, is aligned with the goals of the organization. Might be the specific project organization goals, or even just the goals of what the PMO is trying to achieve. So for people that are just joining me, just to let you know that there is a ebook downloadable, which Jen's going to put into chat, so that you'll be able to pick that up, download that and keep that. So everything that we're going to be looking at today is available for you to read afterwards. We're also recording this right now, and also it'll be made available via the website. Okay, so training needs analysis, that's what we're here to talk about. Hopefully it's of interest to you. And why would it not? This is about development of both yourself and your team, and doing the right kind of things for the PMO, for the organization. So it's not just about the skills gap. it is also using this kind of process allows there to be a lot more thinking, a lot more thought around the strategic alignment of the PMO with the organization. Okay, so because it is a corporate-led framework, tool, process, training needs analysis normally belongs to the HR and learning and development department. It's up to us in terms of us operating within PMO, within businesses, to how much of the business side do we understand and how much that kind of dovetails into our role and what it is that we need to understand in order to be able to navigate our way through different corporate processes and how things get done around here, and making sure that we are familiar with what might be required information wise in order for us to be able to try and get the right kind of training and development for our people within the PMO. So it is about being able to align what we're doing, thinking, want to do with our organization. And in that note, there is 3 different types of training needs analysis. The first one, which we're not touching on today at all, is that organization. Yeah, that's a higher level, more strategic role for somebody in business as usual who will be looking at that kind of organizational training needs analysis, and very much sitting within the HR function and dealing with the heads of department in order to be able to do that full organization-wide training needs analysis. But you can see that the other 2 obviously fit quite nicely with PMO in terms of team, but also the individuals that are working within the PMO. So with the training needs analysis around the team, it is about examining the department. So obviously PMO has, its own department for lots of people, more than 1 or 2 people working in your PMO. You've got to think about the whole structure of who we have in the PMO, the role that they're doing, the kind of skills that they have, the roles and responsibilities that they have, having a really nice balanced team of people to deliver PMO services, and then right down into that individual level, that link into things like performance reviews, development plans, thinking about people's career roadmaps and things like that. So today we're going to be looking at these 2, which is the team and the individual. So, but why does the PMO need to understand about training needs analysis? Let's have a look at why we particularly thought this might be an interesting subject for people to spend a lunchtime with us learning a little bit more about. What we've discovered, certainly in modern workplace, that growth mindset is one of those terms that is really on trend right now, about that we're always learning, that people certainly within PMO tend to be those kind of people that generally are more curious about where things are going in terms of the business, in terms of project management. And that's the growth mindset. It's having an open mind into knowing that you don't know it all. That's the fixed mindset. So the growth mindset is that understanding and that knowing that you're working within a knowledge economy. That's what it's called when we're working in these kind of office-based roles where it's the knowledge that we all have. It's the knowledge that we're using around project management, PMOs, in order to make help our organizations change effectively. So it's knowing that working within PMO, there's an accepted fact that you will be always learning. There is always going to be something that impacts the role and the services that you're offering. So again, it's about training needs analysis, getting into and understanding more about the science, I suppose, behind this kind of thing, rather than just thinking, oh, it's just about how you get on a training course. Yeah, so that's the first bit is dovetailing into that trend at the moment around the whole growth mindset. And there's a lot of literature out there about how some of the biggest companies in the world adopting a growth mindset and that kind of culture that goes with it is making real differences to their bottom lines. Obviously, from a PMO point of view, it's useful to find the gaps, not only in us as individuals, but also within the team itself. We understand that we have people within our team that are particularly strong or really great in a certain areas, and we're trying to find the balance of our entire team rather than trying to find, PMO people that know the inside and out of everything. That's, We don't need that. We just need kind of who's our specialist within the PMO team, but where are our gaps, where's our strengths. Yeah. So again, just understanding how a T&A process can help with that. There's also this element of consistency that actually if we have an approach like something like the training needs analysis process, that we can keep utilizing this and making sure and demonstrating to our organizations that we are fully aware of how we need to develop our PMOs in relation to our corporate approaches to training and development. But having that consistency and doing regular T&As, whether on an annual basis or, you know, however long it needs to be, but being able to do that kind of process analysis the same way each time. We know as PMO people that consistency ultimately takes time, you know, saves us time, but also makes sure that we get closer to a better answer, a more useful solution. So there's a consistency in using a process. We know that though, don't we? As PMO people, we love a process. And then of course, at T&A again, it's just that right training, choosing the right kind of training with a kind of business case element to it. You know, we need this kind of training within the PMO because, and this is how it aligns with where the organization's going, what its strategy might be, and so on. And I suppose the cherry on top of the cake is that actually the PMO, one of its core roles is that we are supposed to be there to help certainly our project management delivery part of the organization. A lot of the services that we offer, one of them is about excellence. It is about being able to get better at delivering projects. And one of the jobs that the PMO can be responsible for is making sure that we are exemplars in the whole kind of training and development space. You know, a lot of PMOs today are, you know, producing workshops on some of the areas to, you know, that project managers need help in, or delivering short courses on, you know, good practice project management and things like that. So we need to also understand some of the science behind, well, training and development. You know, it is an expectation that, you know, the PMO is doing something with the wider organization. But I do sometimes think that we perhaps don't give much thought to this and just think, actually, we need a workshop on this and let's just do it. Yeah. So that's why, again, just looking at this process, this might just add something else to your toolbox. And certainly if your organization is developing training and workshops and approaches for their organization, as well as obviously wanting to develop the PMO as well. So if you're just joining us, just to let you know that everything that we're discussing here today is available as a e-learning, as an e-document, but you can download afterwards. So it gives you the complete overview of the process. Plus we're recording this and you can get that through our regular newsletter. And both of those you could just see in the chat, but if you join later, you might not be able to see those. So Jen will just drop those back into the chat again. Okay, so let's have a look at a process for T&A, and it's an 8-step process. So let's dive straight in, shall we, and have a look at what that process entails. So we know why you might be interested in looking closer at T&A. For some of you, it might mean that you're actually doing some of this stuff if you're leading PMO teams. If you're within a team but don't have responsibility for this just yet, it's an understanding of actually what is good practice around why some training gets, you know, taken on over others. But also, I just think it's that link between the PMO understanding and some of the more wider corporate processes and where you might fit in with that. So this 8-step process then is essentially all about being able to bring more structured choices to training and development around, and obviously specifically we're talking about PMO today. Okay, so there's a process, and again, you know, it will be available for you afterwards, but we're going to go through some of these steps, and some of them I've put together, and you know, let's just see how we get on. But again, if you have any questions as we go through this, just drop it into chat. So setting goals. So from a PMO point of view, then first step is obviously we need to understand what the goals are in terms of developing the PMO team and the people within the PMO itself, but also have to understand what the alignment is, that bigger high level thing at the minute, which is the alignment to the organization's strategy. Now, this calls into a little side note of things, which is about does your PMO have its own strategic objective and vision already that is aligned to the organization's strategy? Now, I don't know how many of you have got that alignment and that kind of, it's been one of these things that I suppose has developed in the last, say, 4 or 5 years, where PMOs are, in order to be able to be seen as good partners within the organization, is making sure that they've got that alignment to the business objectives and strategy and things like that. So if you have that understanding already about what your organization's strategy is around the development of people that are working within the business, you can make that connection between that and the PMO's strategy and objectives as well. And also in terms of the goal setting stage, is actually having that understanding about, well, what are the high level improvements that are actually needed in order to be able to align with where the organization's going. So for example, we know that we're in a position now where the world's changing probably more rapidly than ever before, and seeing just some of the advances already in AI and the impacts that they are having, not just on our organizations, but certainly at a project level, and things that we've already, looked into before, and how do you utilize these things within the PMO? We know this is a prime example, a big example of how things are happening that are going to be impacting our businesses, and therefore strategies are going to be coming out, being adopted, whatever it might be. And that kind of realization that we also need to make sure that we're aligned. If our organization is wanting to do X, Y, and Z, are we ready as a PMO in terms of our future skills? Are we future proofing ourselves? There's also the kind of goal setting for the PMO at the individual PMO level. And this is where you're getting into what it is that the PMO is actually doing for the organization on a day-to-day basis. This is down into the kind of P3M, so that's project, program, and portfolio management, the support that it provides around those core areas. So it's the goal setting around some of those things. So for example, you can see that there will be natural things that your team have strengths in, and you may want to consider goal setting around making those current strengths even stronger, or making sure that they're future proof with the changes that are coming down the line. Or it can be where you have weaknesses in the team, where that the organization is looking for certain support from the PMO, and currently you've probably got weaknesses in some areas, which means that you're not going to do as good a job as you could be. So there's some kind of like soul searching there, and some thinking around, well, what is the goals for the PMO right now in our organization as it exists right now, but also thinking about the future, whether that future is 6 months, 12 months, or longer than that. And then we've also got to think about goal setting in terms of the individuals that are working with the team. And that could be individuals, if you're a manager, thinking about the people in your team, or that's you as an individual working within PMO right now. There's no reason why you can't also think about your own goals. This is something that many people think about doing, is your own career goal setting. Goal setting. It's one of those really difficult things that we find hard to do. But again, goal setting for individuals is very much about thinking not only about the PMO role that they're doing in terms of what I would class the kind of technical elements of the job, which is, how we put a plan together, how do we do business case development, how do I do a benefits map, those technical elements of the role, but also the more kind of like what I call self-development, which is more about the kind of behavioral type skills and things that go hand in hand with the role, whether it be, talking to senior execs or building relationships with a wider range of stakeholders on, all of that kind of side of it as well. But again, is thinking about, do you have your performance review, the development plan? Do you have that process already? For some organizations, it's well embedded. For others, it's not so much. But there's no reason why you can't also think about your own personal goals in terms of what your PMO is doing right now, but also the organization that you're working within. So a big part of it, as we all know, what's goal setting is planning. And isn't that our bread and butter as we work in PMO, in project management, that the better that we plan, the better that we're going to have a more chance of an outcome that's going to be more successful. Now, here's the other thing that obviously is important to our businesses is how much cost. That's one of the biggest things that tends to be, the first thing that happens when we're going through ups and downs is that the training budget tends to get slashed and all of that kind of stuff. We have to have a keen understanding of what costs are involved and having that kind of thinking upfront as we're considering training and development for the team. So having that kind of planning, doing that analysis, having that, understanding what some of the costs are involved upfront before, as you're starting to develop what it is that you're wanting to put towards the business in terms of requirements for the PMO. Again, in the ebook that you can download, these are just some of the considerations. And you can see quite comprehensive. You probably thought of some straight away, which is, well, how much is a course a training course cost? That's the obvious one, is where the money is going to be. But actually, there's quite a lot of other places where costs can come. What we do here at PMO Learning is a couple of different types of training approaches. And certainly for organizations, if you're thinking about PMO team development, we obviously run public courses, which is a one person, two people from an organization come onto a public run course. In other words, they're going to meet other people from different types of organizations, different PMOs. And that generally tends to be costs that are costs for actually joining a training course, and then sometimes an additional cost for some material. Normally there's a certification fee in there. And if it's a classroom course, there's obviously some travel stuff there. But other organizations opt for in-house training, which means that some of their costs can be lowered in some areas, but it also means that some additional costs come in from some different places, such as things like the venue hire. Also things like if you're wanting to develop courses that are very specific to your organization and your PMO team, you have something called bespoke training course development costs and things like that. So again, this is all about us being able to understand what the bigger picture is around some of this stuff. So if we are really wanting to, you're sitting here listening to this now and saying, I've got about 3 or 4 people within our PMO that I would just really love for them to get, some really good benefits management training, for example. I know it's going to be a tough ask because of everything that's going on within the business at the minute. We're probably way down the priority list. This training needs analysis is getting you to think about and get all your ducks in a row before you go to the business, because you have considered everything. And it's much more difficult for people to have objections to you if you've done a lot of that thinking upfront. So let's carry on then. So from a cost analysis point of view, there are quite a few things that you can think about in terms of pushing that through in terms of the kind of business metrics, or what you're expecting to see because of that. Say, let's just keep using the benefits management as an example. So I want to run a benefits management course for my entire PMO team. Here's some costs involved in that, but what's going to be some of the metrics? What are the business going to get back on that? So for example, you've got to be thinking about some of the metrics, which again, you'll not be there shouldn't be any surprises there based on some of the work that we already do around metrics and measures. But again, in the ebook, we give examples of some of the different types of metrics and measures that HR and learning and development parts of the organization are very familiar with, and something that you can also embed into your big ask as you go to the organization and wanting to secure development and training for your PMO, or indeed for yourself. So here's just some of the examples about, these are the metrics that you'd probably want to try and think about. Not all of them, some of them obviously more difficult than others, but again, thinking about them, knowing that they're likely to be some of the pushback that you might get from the organization. So yeah, and again, there's some more examples in the ebook as well. So from a cost analysis point of view, we've looked at the setting the goals, the cost analysis, and then we're on to, and I'm going to kind of group all of these together, which is around being able to identify the people that need development, identifying their actual skills, and assessing those kind of skill levels. So this is the bit, we looked at that definition for what training needs analysis is. It's all about trying to understand what the current situation is, what the current skill levels are, where we need to be, and potentially how we're going to get there. So what's some of the areas that we need to be developing in? Let's have a look at one of the obvious places for many people to start is working in PMO today, is the PMO competency framework. The PMO Learning is a consulting member of the House of PMO. So hopefully you've come across the House of PMO before. If you've not, please do check it out. One of the core texts that the House of PMO has is the PMO competency framework. Now, just a quick side note, some of the training courses that we do are the essentials, the PMO essentials, the essentials for PMO administrators, analysts, managers, and directors use this book as one of the core texts. Before this book existed, you're probably going to do a lot of different types of ways to try and work out what the skill levels are of people that are working within your PMO today, or indeed yourself. That's because nothing existed before. It could be that you're using something or can use something that your organization's created. Again, there has to be a period of being able to assess and understand, well, what is the current situation in terms of the skills and knowledge and the level of understanding with the people within the team? Because if you're going to be able to or want to ask for some development in certain areas, you're going to need a baseline, because you've just seen that there's going to be some metrics and things that we might have to look into. So a baseline is, has been incredibly difficult for a lot of PMO people until this text came out. And it's a PMO competency framework. And if you're not familiar what competency frameworks are, very quickly, what you're seeing on the screen right now are the core competencies that are required for people that are working within PMO. Now, you can be looking at that and thinking, some of those things I don't do, some of them I don't have any experience in. It's not about having core competencies in all of them, but it is about being able to understand what the core competencies are that are required in your job and the job that you do right now. Because what the competency framework allows you to do is an assessment, basically. Choosing the core competencies that do align with your role, you're able to do an assessment about, well, what level am I in some of these areas? And of course, you can probably imagine if you can do an assessment in where you are today, doing an assessment also allows you to compare about where you could be in terms of your training and development if you're to looking at that over the next few weeks, months, years. So competency framework is for PMO people to do an assessment of, well, what have I got now? What am I doing now? What's my level that I'm at right now? And these are the core competencies. And the book splits them into different areas, different categorizations. And I think for most people on this session will be familiar with the bottom left, which is the delivery support. So we've said already that it means project, program, and portfolio, P3M. And these are some of the core areas where PMOs are supporting project, program, portfolio. Some of them be more familiar with others. You probably look at some of those and think, well, yeah, I spend about 50% of my time doing reporting and then across a spattering across some of the other ones. Or you can be a specialist in some of these areas and spend most of your time working in that space. Top right, PMO management, if you're a manager, there's core competencies around that. Admin, always admin, regardless of who we are, what we do, there's an administration competency. And the one that needs a little bit more explaining is P3M enabling, which is essentially that role that PMOs do, where we are creating the environment, the ecosystem, the foundations of which our project delivery organization is delivering. So, for example, that's where, things like the delivery methods. So where does that sit? Where do those standards sit? Who looks after those, who creates those? What about the governance frameworks? What about the assurance frameworks that we use, the things that get used right across the different projects, programs, and portfolios that we're using? The tools, we generally tend to have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 tools that get used right across the delivery organization. So it's quite comprehensive in terms of being able to do an assessment, which we know that in order to be able to do training needs analysis, right, we've seen those 3 steps. is being able to do that assessment. And it just got a little bit easier when this book was released in 2021. So something for you to look out at. But also that competency framework also allows us to look at knowledge, skills, and behaviours. I talked then about we sometimes think that training is all about the technical capability. And I think in a PMO world, again, what I mean by technical capability are things that might be aligned to, say, the delivery method, or some of the frameworks or processes like benefits mapping, say, or putting together a PID, or pulling together the or maintaining a Gantt chart. Those are kind of my technical aspects of what it is that we're doing, that kind of delivery support type role. But we know that development around our knowledge, skills, and behaviors are also equally as important. I think sometimes we tend to think that, doing the Prince 2 training is the be all and end all because it's a really popular thing to do. But actually, does it really help us in our day-to-day job if we're not really utilizing it very much within the organization? That's one of the biggest arguments over the last couple of decades. But this is also thinking about, well, it might not be technical training that we're looking at. It may be about our PMO needs more confidence in how it builds its relationship with senior execs. That may be something that needs the development looking at, in which case we're talking here about knowledge, skills, and behaviors. So again, in the downloadable thing, we'll get you to think about, training needs may be not in the obvious places. So which is why the goal setting stage is really, really important. So here is just an examples of what we're talking about when it comes to knowledge. Here are some of the examples when we're talking about some of the key skills. So you can see how broad some of these things are. But for a number of weeks, I've been out and about talking to different PMO people. The thing that I've heard so much, I don't know, you hear things and then you just seem to hear about it all the time. A number of times I've heard about active listening as being, I've asked people about one of the core things that make them good in a job, or what their PMO is doing really well, and it seems to be one of those things that just seems to be popping up quite a lot at the minute. That's that kind of emotional intelligence type stuff. So again, there you go. Is that something that you think the PMO might be needing, you as an individual might be wanting to do more of? It's not often the obvious that might be the thing that elevates the PMO and indeed your role within it. And then finally, behaviors, the most difficult of all, really, I think, to pinpoint sometimes about what are good behaviors, what good behaviors do we want to see in the PMO, what good behaviors do we want to see in the people within the PMO. We can be the most competent at some of the core competencies, but if we don't think about the way that we go about doing our role, what people see how we do our role, it might be the behaviors that are letting us down. So again, it's all wrapped up in that kind of self-assessment of people that are working within the PMO, in order for us to not only think about what development's needed on that individual level, but also what might be needed as across our PMO to make sure we've got lots of things covered off. So assessing skill levels, big process. It's new. It's like I said, the book's only been out since 2021. It's more recently been a new edition came out. Second edition came out. I think it was earlier on this year. And it takes time if you've never really had that opportunity before, because it makes you think. It really does make you think, not only about you as you do it yourself, but if you're a manager listening to this, it's also getting you thinking about, how does this work and translate with my team? How can I get them thinking about this too? It can be an uncomfortable exercise as well. You certainly do hear that people, are concerned about, well, why am I doing this kind of thing? Is this going to be something that reflects badly on me if I'm showing some skill gaps and things like that? So it can open up some different things, and mainly because we've not really had that opportunity as PMO people to do that kind of self-assessment at quite a kind of like granular detail, really. But a skills assessment sessions can take quite a bit of time, because you want people to be able to do it properly, and doing it properly means reflecting. So again, we think about the training needs analysis as a process. What we've not talked about is it in terms of a timeline. And that's because there's some bits in it that you can see based on the kind of people that you have working with you, may take longer than others to get there in terms of whether they're ready for this kind of assessment. The analysis and prioritization part of the steps is, let me just show you what has allowed some organizations to do, that a House of PMO is a professional membership organization for people that work in PMO. And one of the things that it gives the people an opportunity to do is a team assessment. If you imagine rolling up all those individual assessments, they can then see the team view, which then gives you that idea about where there's some weaknesses, gaps in the team that we might choose to address in terms of doing it all together. Or we might just think about, there's a couple of people within the team that want to lead on that area, in which case it's just their development. So again, having this view is actually really, really powerful, but very, very simple, isn't it? I mean, it's a spider diagram you can see there. This is, you know, just an example of, from a team point of view, that thicker black line is perhaps where you as a manager are thinking, that's the kind of leveling that I want. We don't need experts. I just want everybody to be at that kind of a certain level, which is, you know, a kind of intermediate level that they can pick up and do most of the things that are asked of them in current day. And that's that thick black line. And then you can see where this particular team might be excelling, that do more than that, can, you know, have more skills in that. But you can also see where there's some lack of experience that needs to be addressed. That's been a big change for people. And certainly when it comes to trying to think about doing the analysis of what these assessments can do for people. And again, we've just talked about the competency framework being one way of assessing. If you look at the ebook, which you can download afterwards, or now if you like, there's some other examples in there about how assessment can be done. So it's not just about the competency framework, but I thought this one would be particularly of interest to you. So doing the analysis is about being able to assess against the right levels. So what is important to the current PMO, to the current team, thinking about, well, what kind of levels do we want to get at? You know, what is the level that we need to be attaining? Being able to identify the gaps is half the battle, you know, and then being able to obviously address those gaps, but also how do we capitalize on the strengths? Where do we want to get better, even better at? Because, for example, you might look at this spider diagram there and think, yeah, we're already doing really, really well on the reporting side. Yeah, I was listening to a session earlier on this week from NHS organisation that were just gone down the route of looking at the kind of Office 365 stuff, taking it to the next level. And they were starting to use a lot more of the things like what they call the Power Framework. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. So that's using things like the Power Apps and the Power BI. And it's really started to ramp up and excel what it is that they're doing. For that, it's a prime example of, we might be doing really well at the minute in terms of reporting. However, it's peripherally of tools coming down the line, isn't there? A lot of advances going on, which means that actually we want to get better and better at what it is that we're doing. So a core strength becomes even stronger. And then finally, being able to see that team profile means that we can do some jiggery pokery, for want of a better word, onto how we might be using our training budget in the best way to try and you know, bolster the team as a whole. So it's not just about individuals. The PMO team, it's in the strength of the team itself. Okay. Prioritization, then, of course, what's going to come out of this is going to be loads of other, well, we want to do this. That's the problem. We need to look at that. That's the gap. And before you know it, we want to do all the training in the world. But unfortunately, we're not going to be able to. Prioritization should not be an unfamiliar thing for you if you are currently working, certainly at a portfolio level. But you can be using those same techniques for your own PMO team's development as well. So many of you will be familiar with Moscow, which became, I suppose, more prominent with kind of agile lean development in terms of, you know, what we absolutely must have, should have, could live without. Really simple. But do you use any of those kind of techniques already? You've probably utilized them or hear about them in your team, but again, it's just there within the ebook with some different prioritization techniques. And this is perhaps one of the simplest. quite a nice exercise also to do with the PMO team. If you consider, here's a list of all the things that we've identified as being potential development areas. How do we prioritize this? What's going to be the most important? Where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck? Many people are already familiar with Eisenhower matrix, which again, really simple one. Why do anything more complex than the simplest is sometimes the most the easiest. And again, who doesn't like a 2x2 matrix as well? But again, this is again something to perhaps use with you if you're the manager, how you might want to think about the prioritization. But again, nice team exercise. It also gets people brought into it from a team point of view about what, understanding priorities, understanding, what is really important to our PMO right now, and making sure that we're future proofing and getting a consensus and an agreement about that really does help strengthen a team. So Eisenhower matrix, really straightforward. Then you can start to get a little bit more complicated, which is the weighted score model, which I think many of you, again, would be familiar with, which is, a more scientific way to do it, which may feed in well if you're an organization that likes the metrics, metrics measures, the numbers, the traffic light reporting. If that's the kind of culture it is, you may need to go down this route. Again, in the ebook, we give an example of, we've just been through an exercise. 3 top things that came out of it was we really do need to strengthen our understanding around agile-led approaches. It's the new stuff that's coming down the line around data analytics. For example, we use Power BI there as an example. Are we even at that level? Actually, there's even more advanced stuff now that's available for people to utilize. But also, we just talked about benefits. And the reason why I keep saying benefits is we have a brilliant course on benefits anyway, but it's also one of those areas that I think many PMO people and many PMO struggle with that within the organization. As a whole, it's one of those areas alongside, obviously others, but benefits is one of them. So that's why I put it on there. But you can go and have a look at that benefits course, by the way, because it is a great one. So you can see here there's a weighted scoring that goes on. So you can put a more scientific kind of numbering behind it, which is what we want, isn't it? Is that being able to look quantitative kind of numbers really do help when it comes to trying to put a case across. Hence things like the benefits. Back to benefits again, you see, it's those benefits that have got a number on. So easy. Anyway, within the ebook, it does give you the whole layout of like, well, how did you get to those scoring? How does the scoring work? So you pick your criteria, you put a weight against each of those criteria. So again, this one, alignment to corporate objectives could be pretty important, in which case that's going to get a bigger weight. Maybe cost is not as big of an issue, but actually the impact in what it is that you're wanting that training to do. And again, you're able to do some scoring through that. Again, you can do it as a team, do it as a manager, whatever it might be. But it's that kind of thing where the prioritization needs something more than just I think this is what we're going to get out of it and this is what we need right now. So again, just other things for you to think about in terms of the selecting the skills, what we're going to be focusing on, but also then how do we prioritize what it is that we're going to do. So in terms of the next part of the process, then I've learned these again is, okay, so we know what it is that we need some development in. Okay, yes, we're a training organization, but it's not just about formal training courses. So there's also other places where you can find that development, which could dovetail it really nicely if you've got organizations with a smattering of people around it that have got really good knowledge in certain areas that could impart that wisdom and knowledge to your team. But also thinking about your own individual programs. So actually, rather than doing formal training and training courses that come with badges and things like that, you may want to go down that route of having a formal program. So again, we looked at in the ebook is just thinking about some of those other areas. Now, I think many of you may be familiar with a concept called 70-20-10. which is something that gets banded around in learning and development circles all the time, about where people get their kind of learning and development from. And the 70-20-10 is in terms of percentage. So 10% is through formal training courses, which is, hello, hi, we're PMO Learning and we do that. Yeah, so that's the 10%. The 20% comes from people finding knowledge and learning and stuff through other places. So for example, you go to a webinar, or you go to a conference, or you listen to podcasts, or that kind of thing. But the 70% is actually on the job, the work that you're doing within the organization, and getting it from the people that you're working with, or the opportunity to do certain types of things like secondments to different departments and things like that. In terms of thinking about where you've identified on a training needs analysis where the requirements are for assessment, you can see there with that long bullet pointed list that there are different ways to do it, which on the job is one of them. There are so many different ways to do it, but come with different types of cost analysis. So they may be limited, like cost in how much you're physically handing over in terms of pound notes, that there can be costs associated with perhaps finding somebody within the organisation to come and do a learning session for your team. There could be a cross charge there between departments. Self-studying might mean that people have to take some time out of the day job, maybe 1 day a week doing some stuff outside of work. That's a loss of resource in the team for a day a week. It has a cost associated to it. So just different ways of thinking about the development side of it. But of course, you're listening to us today, which is a training organisation that do the more formal and the technical type stuff, which is the certification type training, but also we do specialist courses based on some of those really nitty gritty areas that we know people have problems with. Hence, for example, the benefits management one. There are others, but I'm just using it for the example today. So the other thing as well is that actually is thinking about training development yourself, because there's two sides to this, because we talked about it at the top of the hour. We are thinking about today in terms of the training and development for our PMO, but the PMO also offers services to our delivery organization in terms of learning and development as well, like putting on a workshop, putting on a training course on a new process, whatever it might be. So actually, it's interesting if you delved into, and there is, again, in the ebook, there's more detail in terms of different types of theory and areas that you can look at if you want to look at how you properly develop some good programs where you've got that kind of, we're not just going to do this project management training and do it for 3 days and then that's it. There's a lot of work that gets done up front and obviously afterwards. And again, there's a whole process around developing training in terms of a kind of scientific thing of like, well, what's the requirements for it? What's the need for it? How do we identify what it is that we're going to be doing? What's the syllabus that you want to put together? We know we're not just going to have somebody standing up there talking. It has to have exercises and ways to engage people. Different people have different learning styles. How can we incorporate different things in order to be able to make sure that we're hitting different people's learning styles, actually doing it, finding people to deliver it, and then that whole process afterwards, which is what I want to move on to, is that kind of actually doing it, but it comes back to that evaluation piece again, because that's what's important to our businesses. Ultimately, the bottom line is, why would any organization give you or your team a chunk of money to do some development if they're not going to see something back in return for that? So again, they're doing the training, and then there's that piece afterwards. So again, the stuff in the ebook, but I just wanted to just talk about the evaluation side of it, because this is the bit where actually we might skirt across this bit quite a bit. And the regrouping is the people that are coming together again, and whatever it is that we've decided to do. When we did the assessments, we looked at where we are now versus against what the organization's doing. We've identified some of the strengths and the gaps. We identified what some of the development training or other mechanisms might have been in order to be able to try and plug some of those gaps or strengthen those strengths. actually now all of that needs to come back in terms of having a regroup about, has it actually done what it is that we wanted it to do? Regrouping, reviewing, and then of course we go again, because we want to be able to refine what we're doing in terms of the process. So again, it's just a really nice process. The whole training needs analysis process, it's nice, it's simple, it's just something that if you're aware of how it's been done at a corporate level, hopefully you can do a better job at convincing, we really want some development in the PMO. We've been through a training needs analysis process and this is what we've got. Can we have that support, and can we have that budget? And can we obviously help build our team, our PMO team and our individuals within it to be doing the best that they can within the whole space of the PMO. So PMO learning, just to reiterate again, we're there for the 10%. It feels like a small number, but we pack a big punch. So we're doing obviously focused on PMO, if you didn't know that already, virtual classroom, in-house, and obviously that kind of tailor-made stuff, that bespoke stuff that we do as well. And there's some obviously more information on the website. So I just want to just talk really briefly just about some of the previous examples that we've had in terms of that kind of training needs analysis, and then utilizing somebody like us. So we can do things like the in-house certification course. So one organization wants people to be certified together around the whole PMO space. There's obviously a lot of benefits to doing it all together, certainly over a period of days. It means that people are learning together, they're questioning together, they're able to bring in their real life examples as we're going through the training. It's a bonding exercise. It's lots of other things other than just the learning the knowledge, and that really works well in terms of obviously doing a kind of formal training. The other thing with certification courses that can be really helpful for a lot of people is finding the common language. Yeah, so you may have different names for different things. Actually, having a certification course brings the best practice, gets that kind of naming conventions for things. Everybody's talking in the same kind of language, which is is always a really useful thing. Certainly in this space, acronym hell that you often come across. The second one is about being able to have that in-house specialist course. So actually we do have a specialist course, and then, for example, I've talked about the benefits management one. We have assurance, for example, another core area for PMO. We've got things like the agile approach to supporting different agile lean type projects. But having an in-house specialist course can allow you to not only learn the good practice, but also adapt a little bit to fit your current status quo, what work you might already be doing around, for example, benefits, bringing in some of those stories, and then again, being able to learn together as a team and all of that kind of stuff. But, again, being able to flex on the materials and things, because actually you want to bring in and reflect what real practice is like at the moment where you are, but also how do we get to a better status quo. And then finally, we have organizations that do a package of learning. So if you imagine doing a training needs analysis and it's coming out with this long list, actually that's something that might be a 3-year type of thing that you want to invest in, or you've got limited funds. So actually I want to just do a packet. I want to do half a day on something here. 6 months later, we might want to do a day on something here. And actually you do sometimes need an experts in PMO learning in order to be able to help find the best way to get that learning and development that suits the pockets and the organization. So that is it today. I just wanted you to find out a little bit more about training needs analysis. It's an ebook, as we've said, from downloadable from the website. The recording will be available again. If you think it will be useful for anybody else within your organization, please do pass it on. Just join onto the newsletter. Any questions that you might have, please, we've got a little bit of time. One of the next stages of what we've thought about that would be really useful. So if you've done training needs analysis, I think the next piece would be really useful for PMO practitioners, and I'd love you to, tell me yay or nay. Is actually looking at that whole process around the development plan. Obviously, organisations have their own approaches, performance reviews, development plans normally pop out of those, and all of that kind of good stuff. We thought it would be really nice to give people some ideas about development and different things that you could be thinking about in terms of development plans. Yes, it's often really related to the job that you're doing and where you are, but I think sometimes if you look at the development plan, there are different things in there. It's not just about what you're going to do, it's how you're going to do it, how effective it was, different ways of doing things. So we thought we might, our next little project to bring to you would be looking at development plans. And then as part of that, looking at career roadmaps, which I thought would be quite a nice way to think about, okay, I'm currently working as a PMO analyst. I want to think about maybe where a road might go in terms of becoming more specialized in an area, becoming a PMO manager, staying where I am, but doing, more complex, risky work than I'm doing at the moment. So there's some different things there as well, which I think would be really worth looking into. And that's what we're going to be working on next. So hopefully it will be useful for you. But first steps, training needs analysis, a worldwide known corporate process that hopefully has just brought you a little bit more insight into how you could be utilizing it within your PMO, but also for you as an individual, just some of the things and factors to consider to hopefully help you get that and secure that funding. Take care, everybody. Thank you.